All right, let's move on to our last session. In my introductory remarks this morning, I said that the lifeblood of the CFAR is really felt through its strategic partnerships within the medical center and the university. And we dedicate our last session each year to highlighting some of those strategic partnerships. And we thought it very appropriate to have the moderator for this session, Dr. Mary Klotman, Chairman of the Department of Medicine. The Department of Medicine represents one of those most highly valued strategic partnerships. So let me turn it over to Mary for this session.
Thanks, Kent. I just want to put a plug in for our partnership. We partnered with CFAR last year on the internally published RFA around two of the key initiatives for NIH, which is HIV and aging and the CURE initiative. And I think we were a little disappointed in the response, and don't feel bad about your survey, John, in terms of 5 responders. I think, you know, we all struggle with how to communicate currently because people don't read emails, and I completely understand that, getting several hundred a day. But these are real resources. And so, again, I'm going to put in a plug. We're going to be putting out another RFA because the value of being at Duke and doing HIV research is really the opportunity to draw people into the field that have science that can help us further the HIV agenda, even if they had nothing to do with HIV. And I think that has been demonstrated over and over again in the HIV field. So reach out to your colleagues they're doing things in science that you think might be applied to these initiatives, which would be HIV and aging and cure science. And that's a pretty broad net. So I would say if we can't find somebody, we're just not thinking out of the box enough. So our first speaker today to highlight partnership is appropriately along the lines of HIV and aging, and Ken Schmader is going to talk to us about the intersection between the Pepper Center and the CFAR in joining forces to address this key initiative. Ken and I go way, way back. We both started in the field of virology many years ago. He was very smart to take that on as a particular focus in geriatric medicine, and really has championed the whole initiative of treatment and prevention of zoster in the elderly, but a number of other complications unique to the aging population. Ken is a very, very wonderful role model in terms of how you develop key partnerships to advance a scientific agenda. So, Ken.
Good afternoon, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and tell you about the Pepper Center. I'm actually a poor substitute for the PI, who's Harvey Cohen. Harvey would normally be here, but our Pepper Research Seminar is exactly the same time slot, so I'm coming to represent the Pepper too. And like Mary mentioned, actually, it makes a little bit of sense because I do a lot of work in infectious diseases and aging. Particularly with vaccine development, and also I sat on a work group to develop a research agenda on HIV and aging that was published a couple of years ago. And I'll mention a couple of other things as we go along too. You know, I think Mary McKellar talked to you a little bit earlier, and John alluded to too, there are an awful lot of individuals that are surviving into old age with HIV infection, and they are experiencing geriatric syndromes, perhaps at a premature rate. So there's a lot of interest in the HIV community amongst these individuals, many of whom were very active politically in the 70s and 80s, and also in the general research community as well. So I want to do a couple background things as we talk about the center. And the first thing is this absolutely key principle of geriatrics, and it has to do with functional status. And by functional status, I mean whole person function. We also look at cellular function and organ function with aging, but functional status is things like mobility, the ability to get around a community, walk, et cetera, like Mary McKellar was talking about earlier, cognitive function, the ability to do basic activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting, eating, the ability to do instrumental activities of daily living. These are more complex activities you have to do to survive in society. Cooking, cleaning, managing medications, managing your money, driving, et cetera. And what older people want most, by far and away, is to maintain their independence and not be a burden on others. Maybe some of you have dealt with that in your parents or your grandparents. This is one of many studies that you see in this table here that illustrates this. See, there's a large sample size of over 2,000 people, and they were given 20 statements and asked to rank which ones were most important. And the first one was being able to take care of myself until close to the time of my death, to maintain that independence. And look at the last one, only 26% wanting to live as long as they possibly could. So mortality, particularly when you're 70s and 80s and 90s, you know you're going to die. It's not necessarily the most important outcome. You want to be independent. And so it's in light of this that the NIA established the National Institute on Aging, these Claude Pepper Old American Independence Center programs. And Claude Pepper was a senator from Florida, representative there too, who did a lot of work when he was in his 80s in the Senate to help older adults. So they were established in the early 1990s in honor of him to do research and training to lead to better ways to maintain or restore independence in older persons. So Pepper Centers were established to advance research and independence in aging, geriatric syndromes, modifying functional decline, but have no expertise in HIV whatsoever. Right? CFARs are unparalleled expertise in all things HIV, but don't have a lot of expertise in the things that Pepper Centers do. So there's this opportunity for the two to work together. And Mary's a perfect example of it, Mary McKellar. Here's a map of the centers nationally. You can see there are 14 of them around the country. And of course, Duke is represented there on the right-hand column with Harvey as the PI. There's one other center I want to point out here. Let's see, is that showing up on the... Okay. And that's this coordinating center right here. It's based at Wake Forest. Their job is to coordinate activities across all the Pepper Centers. The PI of the coordinating center is Kevin High, who's the chief of the infectious diseases section at Wake Forest. And Kevin has a special interest in geriatric infectious diseases. He's been a good friend and colleague for many years. We worked together on a number of things. And one of his interests in coordinating the center was to coordinate CFAR and Pepper Center activities nationally. So he partnered with some CFAR folks and put in a grant to the NIA, an R24 grant, to basically come up with a combined CFAR Pepper Center initiative for pilot studies in HIV and aging and sharing common measures and databases. And that was funded 2 weeks ago. So I called him and he asked me to tell you that not only was it funded, but there's going to be RFAs for pilot studies in HIV and aging released probably in the fall, late fall or early winter. And it's going to be discussed in more detail at the CFAR meeting in Miami coming up in November. So that's an exciting source of more science in this area. So let me tell you about our center here. We have been funded since the very initiation of the Pepper Centers back in the early 90s and I guess 1994, I want to say. The current funding cycle we're in will end in June of 2016. And here is the theme: to understand and modify multiple pathways of functional decline. And there's the program structure. There are 2 research cores, an analysis core that Carl Pieper leads, and a biological studies core. I'll explain these a little bit more. Virginia Krause in rheumatology, and also Chris Newgard for metabolomics. Actually, Beth Hauser is now in the analysis core for the genetics aspects. There's a research career development core led by Ken Lyles and Kathleen Colonna-Marique, a pilot studies core. I do the clinical research part of that, and then Bill Krause does the basic and translational. And then a leadership and administrative core that Harvey Cohen and Miriam Morey leads. And Miriam's a very important person. She's an exercise physiologist who knows a ton about exercise and physical activity interventions. So just another conceptual piece. This is the World Health Organization conceptual model of functional capacity by age for a population. You know, here's capacity increasing over here by age, different life stages, and here's the range of function. As we get older, we become more unlike each other. We get more heterogeneous in any variable you care to name, from the cellular level all the way up to the whole population level. And some of these people that are operating at the lower end get below a disability threshold and can't maintain their independence. So the trick here is to modify this decline or rehab people so they are independent, right? Well, here's the conceptual model for our center here. And you can see in the middle this functional reserve going down with time, functional capacity. And basically the research we've been doing is linked around the outside here. We've been doing a lot of metabolic profiling, biochemical profiling, genetic, and also functional measures that can lead into mechanistic studies, also doing cohort studies to identify lifespan functional trajectories, and interventions to modify this functional decline, mostly around exercise and nutrition supplementation. Okay, last thing you wanted to see after lunch was an org chart, but this is really helpful to walk through. So here's the leadership core that I talked about here, and there's an internal operating committee that consists of the people here. But out of this comes the research development core, and the job of this core is to develop and train outstanding investigators. And you can see Mary McKellar's name here. These are our current RCDC people. Richard Lee is a geriatrician endocrinologist who does work in osteoporosis, Liza Janeo in advanced pulmonary disease in older adults. Then we have a pilot studies core. Jonathan Steiber is a cardiologist doing work on scaffolding proteins in muscle and proteins in sarcopenia. Jennifer Wu in incontinence and Heather Whitson in comorbidity. Now here's the sad part for me. What's happened over time is the Pepper Center funding has undergone budget cuts over the last, well, actually, 2 cycles. And then with the sequester, they cut all the centers about in half. So it used to be $1 million a year is what we got. Now we're around $500,000 a year. And we had to do something with some of these cores. So these 2 people got independent funding. Only John's getting the funding. And then from here on out, the pilots are actually going to be funded by money from Dean Andrews. She's been very generous in giving us pilot study money. So we do have pilot study money, which we'll be calling for proposals in the future you might be interested in. The analysis core does design, data management, statistical analysis for these people and all the externally funded projects we've got going on here. Remember, we're operating as a core to provide services. We don't fund all these external ones. And then there's the biological piece, biochemical core that Virginia Krause leads, and metabolomics, James Baines and Chris Newgard. There are 2 other things I want to show. One is this functional measurement resource group. So we have a bunch of people that know how to measure function in older adults. And it's not as easy as it sounds. There are a lot of different measures and a lot of ways to analyze the data. And then we have a data integration working group that gets together every other Thursday at the Aging Center, and basically integrates these data and works on publications. It's really a nice group to work with. It might be of interest to you. So I'll close with this slide. It kind of shows what I was mentioning, that these externally funded projects, the junior faculty projects, pilots, all work with the analysis core and biological studies core and the data working group as well. So, basically what we offer is this expertise in exercise and physical activity, nutrition, disability, multimorbidity, the analysis capabilities, the data integration, and also the pilot studies that might be of interest to you too. So with that, I'll go ahead and end and see if there are any questions, or do we move on to the next? Okay.
Just a comment. So the pilot studies, dollars is a great opportunity to join forces, particularly since you've gone for the budget cut.
Yeah. Yeah, we're down to $25,000 per pilot, just to be quick. Yeah, all right. I like that. Thanks, Mary. Yes. Oh. Go ahead. Why don't you start? Thanks, John. Yeah, we definitely provide help in doing recruitment, absolutely. Now, with Mary McKellar's project, she's getting those folks within the clinic. But there's a lot of skill and knowledge that we have about how to recruit older adults into clinical trials. In fact, I do a lot of that. John.
Ken, did you say a 50% cut?
Yeah,
funding
over
for
time.
centers?
Over time.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
Compared to yeah, thanks, John. We're functioning at a lower level. All right, thanks a lot, folks. I really appreciate your attention.